Right, I can confirm we are live streaming and the meeting can commence.
Hello everybody. It's Councillor Tweed. I'll be chairing the meeting as one of the co-chairs of Scrutiny. So can I welcome everybody, particularly the members of all the other members of the committee. I think that we've got quite a lot here. So I'll just go on. I'll just explain how the meeting will work, or hopefully it will work. During the meeting, all microphones and cameras will be switched off, with the exception of myself and any of the presenting officers. If anybody leaves the meeting for any reason, the meeting will continue. But if we become inquorate, obviously we'll have to make everybody aware of that. On the privacy and confidentiality, please ensure that any items relating to personal, private, confidential or exempt information are not visible through your camera or screen sharing until any press and the public have been excluded from the meeting. The proceeding of the meeting will be recorded and is going to be broadcast on YouTube live for the members of the public to see. Can I ask that when you are not speaking, the microphone remains on mute and your camera is switched off? Questions and comments. If you wish to speak at any point, please turn on your camera and raise your hand, or alternatively indicate via the chat function. The meeting facilitator will then unmute your microphone and invite you to speak at the appropriate time. You should then click to confirm that you wish to unmute your microphone and then state your question or comment. Muting, please do not try to unmute yourself. The meeting facilitator will do this for you. There will be a slight delay and then you will be prompted to allow yourself to be unmuted. Please select the blue button that says unmute now to do so. Approving items. When I request you all to approve or note an item, I will ask you to turn on your camera and the meeting facilitator will then unmute everyone. If you have any issues, this will be your opportunity to raise them. Silence will be taken as approval. Right, as I said before, all members are invited to attend this meeting as members previously requested to hear information on the presentation of item number 2, which is the publication of the UCLAN, which is Minimising Firefighters' Exposure to Toxic Fire Effluents, Interim Best Practice Report. I can confirm that the following members who are on the Scrutiny Committee are all in attendance and that all members present can be heard and can hear and be heard. Is that okay? Is anybody having a problem with that? No? Okay, so we'll now go on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. We've got Councillor Angela Coleman and independent person Anthony Boyle. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest that need to be made? No. As far as I'm aware, there are no matters of urgency to be admitted onto the agenda, and there are no items of exempt. There are no exempt items today that require the exclusion of the press and the public. So we'll now go on to agenda item 2, which is the minutes. We need to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Could members now turn on their cameras by clicking start video in bottom left-hand corner of the screen? The meeting facilitator will now unmute everyone to provide you with an opportunity to raise any issues with regards to the minutes. If you wish to raise anything, please click to confirm you want your microphones to be unmuted and state your comment. If no issues are raised, the minutes will be taken as approved. Okay. Can I thank you for that, and all turn your cameras off again. Thank you. We'll now go on to agenda item 3, which is the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership. And I believe Nick is going to give us the presentation. So Nick, you can start whenever you're ready. Thanks for that.
Thanks very much, Chair. Just to confirm, I won't actually be doing the presentation. I'm just here to do the introductions. Very briefly, it's normally Mr. Mottram's area of speciality, but Dave unfortunately is not too good himself, so he's not in work today, so I will do the introductions. The purpose of the report itself is to provide members with an overview and an update on the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership, and the recommendations moving forward are just that members note the information contained within this report and, more importantly, the accompanying presentation. What we do have here today, hopefully, we have Police Superintendent Andy Ryan, who is going to do the presentation, and I certainly don't want to steal any of Andy's thunder and the fantastic work that's going on here in Merseyside. And also I've got Gary Oakford, who is also on the call, who is the area manager for prevention, who should be able to give any answers to any questions that members have. So without further ado, I would like to hand over and thank Police Superintendent Andy Ryan for his presentation, please, if that's okay.
Right, thank you, sir, and good afternoon, councillors. Good afternoon, all. I'm going to try and just share the presentation on the screen. Right, Kelly, I don't know if you can help me.
I think you just at this top, if you just click on the tab to start this screen, the slideshow.
Yeah, I appear to. Apologies, I'm not overly familiar with Zoom, so I have to apologise. But it worked in our practice run earlier, and unfortunately isn't now at this end.
Andy, if you go to slideshow on the top brown one about...
Yeah, unfortunately I don't appear to have that option at this moment in time. My Zoom screen has minimised and I've lost all my controls. And if anybody...
Annie, do you have control? Are you able to do it for him?
No, I don't have what I had earlier, Kelly. Apologies for this, everybody.
Nobody said it would be easy.
No, that's right. It did work on our dry run earlier.
It did.
Can I just ask, do we have any contingencies if something like this does go wrong? Are you quite happy to just give us a verbal report if you can't get anything on screen?
Yeah, it now says that I am sharing. Can anybody see that? Or
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, it just needs to be on the,
Yeah.
just press
The
F5
slideshow.
while presenting it. Yeah, we can't see the screen.
how about that?
Yes, there you go.
Okay, so you can see that now, can you?
Yes.
Yes.
Apologies, I've lost the Zoom screen, so I can't see what you are seeing, but if you can see the screens, then we'll be able to go. So apologies for that, first of all. If I can just introduce myself, I know Mr. Searle has introduced me. So my name's Andy Ryan. I'm a Detective Superintendent with Merseyside Police, and I am currently seconded as the head of Merseyside's Violence Reduction Partnership. A little bit of background for this, because I'm aware people have varying levels of knowledge around the VRP. But in 2018, the government, as part of the serious violence strategy, decided to invest in the reduction of serious violence, and the creation of 18 violence reduction units were funded and put in place. Here in Merseyside, we quickly changed the name to Violence Reduction Partnership, as we feel that this is far more reflective of our makeup and the fact that it is a real true partnership here in Merseyside. So July 2019, my predecessor and the team set up the Violence Reduction Partnership here, with the aim of reducing serious violence via a public health approach, and I'll come on to that more in a moment, if I may. If I can start by showing you a short film, and we tried this and this did work as well, but short film, it's about 4 minutes long. We've made it recently with a local production company called Mocha, and it gives an overview of the VRP and what we do. So hopefully you will be able to see and hear this. I think earlier the picture was slightly jumpy, but the audio was good, so I think it's better that way around. So I'll press play now and let me know if there's any problems, please. We want all people in all of our communities across
Merseyside to live free of violence and free of the fear of violence.
It has huge impacts on population's health, on their well-being, but also huge impacts on local services and the local economy.
We have an opportunity to essentially wind the clock back, as it were, and start right at the beginning of an individual's journey.
There are risk factors for violence, which basically means that we can actually prevent violence.
So we want to change cultures and change behaviours and mindsets. We're in for the long haul for this generation, for future generations. Ultimately, we all live in Merseyside and we want to live in a safe Merseyside.
Like in their relationships, it could be things in their community or society. What the VRP does is actually look at the issues that are facing the geographical area in terms of violence, looks at the data, allocates resources accordingly, then re-examines it, evaluates it and monitors what the impact is.
But we can only do that if we have a real diverse level of background to the professionals that come and work within our team. We work with the community, we work with academia to take a real whole system approach.
So it's that unique way of working which then actually moves things far further forward than possibly we might have done previously.
Community engagement and youth voice are really, really important. It needs to be a common thread that runs through everything that we do. We can actually ask before we start, is this a good idea? What do you think? And from the voice of the young people, we can tweak those initiatives and programmes and projects.
Is getting out there to the community so that people are aware of the impact of things like ACEs.
A lot of the young people that we're working with are already in the criminal justice system or around the periphery of that. Our objective is to try and steer them through and out of that into a positive life and to provide them with opportunities, to provide them with support, guidance. We put family at the heart of the work that we do because we believe we can make a real difference there.
The importance of education weaving through Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership is really about a lot of universal support, targeted support, guidance. We also need to recognise our areas in which targeted support can be most helpful. We've realised how important support is to young people. It can actually not only divert them from serious violence, but it can also give them massive boosts in their self-esteem, and it can actually open up avenues for them we didn't know existed. So we've looked at how can we maximise the impact of that activity, but focus it more in areas where we know we've got more of a problem with serious violence.
Campaigns are a really, really important part of what we deliver. Bad Eyes Open, which is a campaign that seeks to educate and tell people about the warning signs of children being groomed in our communities every single day. Another excellent campaign we have ongoing at the moment is You Know Who, to educate people and give them warning signs around cuckooing.
One of the purposes of Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership is to be offering guidance that can be used by organisations, by establishments.
We also have a programme that's known as the Destinations Directory. That's aimed at 16 to 25-year-olds, and within it, it's got employment, training, education. We're also looking at systems change as well, so we ensure that all the 5 boroughs all share best practice.
If we get it right, it means that people who are at risk don't have to go through failing at school, being excluded from school, being vulnerable to being exploited through county lines, ending up in prisons, dying younger. If we can reverse that and actually get in upstream and are able to target interventions accordingly, then that will be better for all.
What we will continue to do is be evidence-led, and what that tells us is we need a long-term sustainable solution to tackling serious violence, because we cannot arrest our way out of this problem.
Okay, thank you. I hope that came through. Okay, it's just a few minutes, and we've made that really to, I suppose, build on the brand of the VRP, make sure that people understand what the VRP is about, what we do, and give people a better understanding. So I hope it started to achieve that, and I'll seek to build on that throughout the rest of the presentation. This screen that you can see now, this is a quote that I picked up on, which I think succinctly articulates really what we do. So we've got the public health approach and a number of different steps which the World Health Organization sort of suggests that we go through. However, this quote says it nicely, really. So what I'd say is, in terms of pulling people out of the river, we're very, very good at that. We're very good at reacting, you know, whether that be the police, the fire service and the wider partnership. We are very, very good at helping people when they are in trouble. However, I think it's probably fair to say that the VRP is, and the government push on this is an acceptance that we need to improve on that upstream part. Hence, like I say, that we have invested in the Violence Reduction Partnership. So the public health approach, you know, here in Merseyside, what we're saying is we don't want to look at violence as isolated incidents or solely as an enforcement problem that people would expect traditionally the police or the prisons or probation to deal with. Instead, we see violence as preventable consequences of a range of different factors, and most notably adverse childhood experiences, which I'll come on to more in a moment. So we need to recognise an impact upon the known risk factors and really deal with the root causes of serious violence, which is at the heart of what we do. So this slide shows who's involved. A number of different agencies and partners then has actually grown. There's additional ones coming online as well. So they're the partners that are involved in the core team. Clearly Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service are heavily involved in that, and I'm really glad to say that Mike Baratti and Pete Owens, both from the fire service, both involved in the core team and do an outstanding job for us. And again, I'll come on more to their responsibilities for the team. So we're a co-located team and have representation right across those, from public health through to the fire service, police, local authorities, probation, youth offending and the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. Having the fire service involved is one of the unique things about Merseyside's Violence Reduction Partnership, because we are the only violence reduction unit in the UK who have the fire service involved. So we're very, very proud of that, and you know, just is a good illustration of just how much support we get in Merseyside from the fire service. In addition to our core team, we have our governance and our steering group. So in addition to Mike and Pete's involvement, we have Ben Ryder on the steering group, who is key to the strategic decision making and the direction that I am set by that steering group. So that's really, really good to see the fire service involved in that also. Over on the right hand side of this slide, we just talk about something that's really, really important, something I talk about a lot, but understanding our serious violence problem and how we do that. Because, you know, if you go back to the public health approach, if we don't understand step one, we don't understand the scale and nature of our serious violence problem here in Merseyside, then we won't be equipped in order to tackle that. So all of the other steps around designing interventions and policies to tackle our serious violence problem and monitoring and evaluating that and so on, for me, is all very, very difficult to achieve and be successful in if you don't know what your problem is. And so there's big issues around, we need to make sure that we've got access to multi-agency data. An example of, if we only had access to police data, which, you know, at times, you know, we've been guilty of being too reliant upon police data, you would miss nearly 50% of people who walk into A&E departments in Merseyside and say that they've been assaulted, because so many people never report it to the police. So really, really important that we have access to lots and lots of different data. So something that we're leading the way on here in Merseyside, we've got a collaboration with John Moores University, the Public Health Institute there, and we have set up the VRP Data Hub. And what this is it's an online repository for data that comes in from the police, from the fire service, from the National Health Service, walk-in centres and ambulance data. And all of that data comes in and can be analysed. So we've got analysts right across the partnership who have access to that, who can use that data to better inform people's responses and how they're going to deal with violence and indeed some other issues. So there are other violence reduction units and partners right across the country looking at how we're dealing with that at this moment in time and seeking to replicate what we do. Furthermore, we recognise, whilst it's an outstanding tool, there is still room for improvement. So we're currently working with some other organisations, you know, for me, to get the British Transport Police to get deprivation data on there, some education data around school exclusions and so on, would really add something to what we've got there as well. So quite excited about that and really proud of the fact that we stand out in that regard. This slide, this is our problem profile. So I mentioned about us being the only violence reduction unit, as everybody else calls them, our VRP, the only one in the country that have the fire service involved in our core team, but also the only ones to recognise arson as serious violence. So just to provide clarity here, different counties will have slightly different definitions of what serious violence is in some cases. We recognised here in Merseyside that arson, well, my personal view is, whilst arson offences are relatively low in frequency, they are very high harm. And so we have house fires, which are always potentially fatal. We have vehicle fires, which in Merseyside, as a result of serious and organised crime or domestic abuse, are often precursor events to other incidents. And so it's really, really important that Merseyside Police, Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, and indeed the VRP are working closely together in order to better understand that. So what we did very, very early on was brought arson into our definition of serious violence, which means we're tracking it, we're monitoring that data all the time. And so in doing that, in including it in our problem profiling and having such significant involvement from the fire service in the VRP, both the core team, steering group, and just wider support as a partnership, is really, really good. And the very fact that it is now involved in our definition owes a lot to the determination of Ben on the steering group, and also Mike and Pete in their involvement. So it's really, really good. And I have to say the Home Office often make reference to it. We are unique in that regard. It's something we're proud of, and the Home Office often point out to some of the other VRUs that, you know, you are still lagging behind Merseyside with regard to that. So really, really good. If I can move on to the next slide. So this is our life cycle model on the left-hand side of the screen. So this was put together following a stakeholder consultation event. And what it does is shows our focus from preconception right through to early adulthood. And it shows the different groups and themes of interventions that we have in the different areas. Now, research demonstrates that adversity in childhood increases the risk of a range of poor outcomes right across the life cycle. So, like I said earlier, we're stepping away from that more traditional enforcement approach to serious violence, and we are looking at what are the root causes. So instead of dealing with the here and now serious violence, which lots of other agencies, probably predominantly the police, do and do well, what we're trying to do is prevent it from happening in the first place, prevent violence from becoming a part of somebody's life. So we look at the root causes, and I mentioned adverse childhood experiences. There are many, many things that people will say, and academics, lots and lots of research that will say what causes people to become involved in violence, not only as offenders, but also at times as victims. So there are many, many examples of this, but school exclusions, to give you some ideas, over 50% of our prison population in the United Kingdom were excluded from school at one point or another. Therefore proving that if you are excluded from school, the likelihood of you becoming involved in crime or violence at some point in later life is increased. Now here on Merseyside, we exclude, on average, over the last 3 years, over 4,500 young people on one occasion or more. Permanent exclusions, just over 200 a year in Merseyside. So significant numbers. So the VRP have done lots and lots of work in order to try to reduce that and give alternatives to senior leadership teams in schools to say, if that child is being disruptive, whereas you may well be working towards exclusion, can we offer some alternatives? Can we offer some education as to why they may be behaving in that way? Because other things may be going on in their life or having gone on in the past. Another example would be prisoners. So whilst most of our work focuses around those young people and those early years, we do things around reducing reoffending in prisoners. So there's lots and lots of evidence that says if somebody is in prison, they are much less likely to reoffend either in prison or when they come out if they feel that their family are being looked after on the outside. And so we do a number of programs working with children who have a parent who is currently serving a custodial sentence, as well as families, partners of prisoners. So lots and lots of work there. And then what we're doing is, if I just draw you back to the life cycle model on the left-hand side there, if you consider that as a clock face, from 12 o'clock through to 4 o'clock is those very early years. from preconception through to 5 years, so preschool. And I have to hold my hand up here and say that we weren't doing enough in relation to those early years, and it's a really important formative stage of a child's life, and so we're really trying to put that right at the moment and putting a real focus in this area. You know, so there'll be a number of different things. Speech and language therapy will be one of them. So again, you know, the police officer in me says at times, well, speech and language therapy, how is that going to stop you know, serious violence? However, if I refer you to an older study now, it's called the 30 million word gap. Very interesting if anybody wishes to look at it. But ultimately, there was an extensive study done with 3-year-olds over a 2.5-year period. And what it found was that children in deprived households, for a number of reasons, they may be deprived, but children in a deprived household hear over 30 million less words being spoken each year than children in a professional household. And then that goes on to add to the evidence that says children with poor quality and quantity in their vocabulary leads to poor outcomes in their 20s, 30s and beyond. So it is really important that we look at those root causes, and it may not actually have any direct link to serious violence, but there are many, many things happening early in a person's life that can impact upon their outcomes later in life. So what we do in the VRP, we implement a range of different interventions right throughout that life cycle. There is a focus on young people, there is a focus on youth violence in open spaces, and we're really trying to push a real focus on the importance of family in drawing people away from violence also. On the right hand side of the screen, I mentioned some of the different interventions that we have in place, a number of different things, and I'll come on to mention some of the more relevant ones for this meeting, if I may. So the contribution of Merseyside Fire and Rescue. So like I say, Mike and Pete are really, really important members of our core team and work with us on a number of different things. So in the early days of the VRP, it's fair to say that we brought arson prevention into our problem profile. We recognised just how harmful and just how important it is here on Merseyside. But we didn't quite get off the ground some of the arson prevention initiatives that we wanted to early on. So Mike and Pete built a strong strand around training, employment, around resettlement and so on, and did some outstanding work, and some of them are mentioned lower down in that slide there. So some outstanding work, destinations directory, some work with the DWP, as well as a number of things around employment and shelter and ACE's best practice with some of our housing initiatives. But if I can draw your attention to the top there, the arson prevention. Mike and Pete have been really, really keen to bring this more into the VRP, and I'm glad to say that we now have commenced a number of really, really good interventions to their credit. So what we've done, they are now pulling together a number of booklets for the community. So we funded these booklets being pulled together, and what these will do, they will give some multi-agency information and deliver a number of key messages around deliberate fire setting. It'll encourage reporting through Crime Stoppers and other ways, and so they will be available to the wider community and be used by MFRS and other partners to educate people. Target hardening, amongst other things, there will be availability in the purchase of a number of letterbox guards, and I apologise if I'm using the wrong terms there, but to stop accelerants and fireworks and so on coming through people's letterboxes. So really, really good, really valuable interventions. The Healing Together programme, this is a 6-session programme. It's aimed at young people who've been experienced DA and been affected by DA. So the Fire and Rescue Service are currently piloting this programme in Knowsley and St Helens and leading the way on this. And what I would say is early days, however, we have very high hopes for this programme. It looks outstanding and the feedback is excellent in terms of what we see with this programme. So we've got really high hopes, and I look forward to some evaluation that will be forthcoming in that, just to see how much value that's adding for us. So exciting in relation to Healing Together. And then finally, an animation. I know Mike's had meetings over this yesterday about advancing this, and they've brought in an animation agency, design agency to work on this. And there'll be a real focus around the offender. the person who is deliberately setting fires and so on, and adverse childhood experiences that have impacted upon them. And the idea of the animation is to be used by professionals to educate people and help people understand and see the impacts of getting involved in arson and arson with intent to endanger life. So I could speak a lot longer on these. What I'd say is I'm really proud of what's been achieved there in relation to what Mike and Pete have done in this area, because they've worked really hard with their other colleagues in the VRP, but worked really hard to push arson prevention and, to give a real focus on that for the VRP. So, like I say, we take great pride in the fact that we're the only ones who are leading the way in relation to that. This slide, just briefly, some of the media interest in the VRP. It's fair to say more and more media interest coming our way, and I suspect one of our strengths is our campaigns and a number of things we do that brings in that media interest. So we have a really experienced comms and marketing officer who has led the way in terms of Eyes Open and You Know Who, which are two really impactful campaigns. Some of you may have seen posters and things in relation to those, and they're largely around cuckooing, around county lines. And we've had some excellent feedback in relation to Eyes Open that has now gone national, with Violence Reduction Unit and police forces nationally seeking to take that on and effectively brand it with their name at the bottom of the posters and so on. So really, really proud of that. And then finally on this slide, just a film that we've put together. So we've made a film, To the Edge, really professional production that we brought a team in to do. And the idea was we wanted to draw people away from exploitation and county lines. And it's become much bigger than that. It touches upon poverty and the importance of healthy relationships and decision making and so on. So it's very hard hitting. It was designed for schools officers, so police officers who go into schools and work with the schools and sometimes troubled children, in order to show them just how serious this is. And it follows the life of a teenager who sadly gets involved in knife crime, and I hope at some point you get the opportunity to watch that. It's about 24 minutes long. It is very hard hitting, but really impactful, and again we are getting some outstanding feedback in relation to that. Final slide from me, if I may, I suppose, around next steps. So we've learnt a lot in the first 18 months of the VRP, and I'm glad to say that whilst I've only had it verbally yet, the Home Office have called me recently to say that they will be funding Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership in the 21-22 financial year as well. So really excited about that, and we hope that the VRP is here to stay. COVID, you can't really go through a presentation without mentioning it at the moment, but it's, I suppose in some respects, it's provided us with an opportunity to put our foot on the ball, as it were, to pause and reflect on what's worked and what hasn't. I'm not afraid to put my hand up and say, do you know what, some of the things that we've done, we've learned a great deal from, but maybe, we won't repeat that experience moving forward. What can we mainstream? So what I don't envisage the VRP doing is being something that just funds the same things over and over again. I don't want us to be seen as a funding body. I want us to be seen as a really creative, innovative group of people who have the expertise to say, right, okay, let's a proof of concept idea, let's do this. And if it works, we can then go to that organisation, and that organisation might be Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, it might be probation, it might be Merseyside Police, and we say, we've tried this and it works, and hand it over. You mainstream that into your processes now, and the VRP can go and work on something else and focus on something else now. So I don't see the VRP being something that just funds the same things year after year. See it as innovation, creativity, and working with partners to decide where our risks are and where we can have the biggest impacts. Really important as well is developing our brand. The film that you watched at the start of the presentation, that is part of that. We want to get our brand out there. I have to say that before I came to this role, I hold my hand up and say I didn't know a great deal about the VRP. Well, I'm hoping that people won't be saying that for much longer, because I want to get this out there. So we get, like I say, the media interest helps getting our brand out there through such as the film and newsletters and different things we do are all helping with developing our brand moving forward. We've got some remodelling to do. So like I say, further development. I mentioned earlier when we had the life cycle model on the screen. You know, we want to develop ourselves around early years. We want to develop our analytical functions so that we're better prepared to say where do we need to be working in what areas and what themes, and including geographically what areas. And also, you know, arson prevention, you know, we continue to develop what we're doing there. So some excellent work, but it is early days in relation to that. So we want to continue to build on that so we can, you know, continue to be proud of the fact that we are the forerunners in relation to this. And then I suppose finally, sustainability. The Home Office are, I am very glad to say, continuing to fund us. Will that be the case in 5 years' time? I don't know the answer to that. So what we're really looking at, are there match funding opportunities? Are there other sustainable funding opportunities that the VRP can look at in order to make sure that we can outlive any existing funding and that we can really push on and make a difference for the communities of Merseyside? I've run through it there. I'm trying not to take too much of your time, so apologies, I can't see your cameras because of the technical hitch I've had, and apologies for that again, but I'm happy to take any questions if that's okay, Chair.
Yes, that's fine. Are there any questions? Councillor Spurrell?
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Andy. That was really, really interesting. I picked up some of that from various roles I've had in the past, but it's really good to see the kind of overall summary of it all. I have two questions, one of which is about the funding, and obviously you said you're hopefully going to get it for next year, which is great. Is there any more information about how the funding breaks down? So thinking specifically from the fire authority point of view, where does the funding go in terms of supporting specific interventions from Merseyside Fire Rescue Service, or, you know, how does it break down in terms of partnership? Where does that funding go? And then my second question was around how you're measuring success. So you said you're going to have an independent evaluation, which sounds great. Have you got any kind of highlights, kind of headline statistics around, you know, kids you've managed to divert from crime, or, you know, how many arson incidents you've, you know, reduced, those kind of things?
Great, thanks. I'll address both of those. In terms of the funding, so Merseyside's share of the funding that the Home Office put towards the serious violence strategy is we get £3.37 million per year for the Violence Reduction Partnership. So that comes in through the Police and Crime Commissioner, and the Police and Crime Commissioner effectively gives that to myself as the lead for the Violence Reduction Partnership in order to spend that on the number of different interventions that we have. So we have the steering group that, of course, holds me to account on that. So what we do is, that is split between a number of different, what I term budget lines. So what the Home Office say, you must spend 25% of your budget on interventions. So the rest can be spent on staffing, on academic support, and a number of different things. What I'd say is Merseyside, we've had a philosophy where we are attempting to spend as much as we can on interventions. So in this financial year, we will spend about 70% of our budget on interventions, which is, of course, is way more than the 25% that we're obliged to. So, you know, we're really pleased about that. Now, I say that, and I do think we need to build on our team. I mentioned analysis earlier. I do think we need to bring in some additional analytical capability. So additional staff and costs and so on will have an impact in terms of the interventions budget, if you like, but the vast majority of our budget will continue to be spent on interventions. It's not split as such between, you know, right, we'll do this on arson prevention and we'll do this on whether it be community safety, whether it be education, whether it be reducing reoffending. So we don't necessarily allocate an amount of money, or certainly didn't at the beginning of this financial year, allocate an amount of money to either an organisation or a theme. We're seeking to, next year, from April onwards, to work more in themes. So we're currently doing some analysis to decide where is the greatest demand and the need, where is the need greatest in Merseyside, and therefore where can we have the biggest impact. So as a result of that piece of work, we'll be able to say, right, okay, if the biggest impact we can have is around awareness of adverse childhood experiences, education and reducing reoffending, just to pluck three, if I may, then we may say, right, okay, they're going to be our three key pillars that we work on and where the majority of our funding and our resource goes towards. And then we have a number of other smaller areas that get different amounts of funding, resource, expertise, etc. And so there are many thematic areas that we look at. We've got some successes from this year. We've got some learning from things that maybe haven't worked the way we wanted to this year. But ultimately, what I'd say, we're in a much stronger position to move on through the 21-22 year, knowing that, okay, that was money well spent, maybe that wasn't. And importantly, if I may, I'm always keen to say it's not necessarily about the money. Hopefully the VRP is a lot more than that, and sometimes one or two organisations can be guilty of maybe looking at us as a funding body, and we're not that. We want to be much more than that and be involved in directing policy and process in some organisations and really supporting people. Not only that, there's a lot of outstanding work going on across Merseyside, right across the partnership. If I may, it's not always coordinated very well between different organisations. So I feel that we have a part to play in bringing people together and learning that way. If I can go on to your second question in terms of how we measure success, you rightly point out the independent academic evaluation is a key part of that. The evaluation of last year, for me, was probably a little, it's really good, really insightful. However, I'm more interested, instead of saying, you're doing this really well, I actually really want to know what aren't we doing well? What do we need to do differently? So we're encouraging a bit more, I suppose, openness and critical feedback in relation to that evaluation. We're then very keen in terms of building in evaluation processes within our team and our ability to evaluate internally some of the different interventions that we have going on. We then, very difficult during 2020, but we're very keen to be more and more engaged with our communities, particularly our young people. Now, that's been really difficult during 2020 for obvious reasons. But what we've done is we purchased a system called Dialogue, which is an online, very modern approach to engaging with our young people. It's been really good. Relatively early days. We've had it for about 3 or 4 months now. And what we do, we're able to set challenges and questions for people online. And if they're with youth workers and so on, they can go on, or indeed, if they were on their own, they can go on and respond to that. And you can almost have some open dialogue back and forth. So really good. So I suppose back to success criteria, we are looking to get more and more engaged with our communities and invite feedback from them as well, that we can say, okay, we'll take that, and we need to do things differently if that's the outcome. If I can just also say, the success criteria, or the measures that the Home Office give us there's 3 of them: reduction in serious violence offences, reduction in homicide, and reduction in hospital admissions. So of course we will also measure ourselves against those 3 criteria. It's difficult because all 3 of those criteria have gone down in the last 12 months. We can all debate whether that's as a result of the VRP, whether it's as a result of some excellent work across the partnership, whether it's as a result of COVID, or a combination of all of the above. But so there are a number of different ways that we measure our own success, and we'll continue to develop that to make sure that we can be held to account and we know whether what we're doing is working or indeed not.
Well, some of these measures may take 5, 10, 15 years to see the outcome of. So it's tricky to kind of say in this year this is the success we've had. Some of it will be a very long-term picture. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. It's a really important point. The VRP is not something that we will see huge reductions as a result of the VRP in 12 months' time, or indeed 2 years' time. It's really not. It is a long-term approach, and what we are attempting to do is show that, to put it simply, we want to show that little Johnny, and stop little Johnny being from somebody who carries a knife in 10, 15 years' time, to put it very simply in my terms. So really important to us, but you're absolutely right, it is a very long-term strategy.
Chair, I think Group Manager Ben Ryder's indicating that he'd like to speak, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, hi Chair, thank you. It was just to add a little bit more detail. I think Andy's covered the questions really well, but just knowing Emily's background as well. What Merseyside Police have done to a very in a very positive way is they've empowered each of the local authority areas through the community safety partnerships. So there's an element of the funding that is sort of provided to the community safety partnerships and the CVS within each of the local authority areas, and then each of the local authority areas has a really robust process to be able to spend that VRP money in a way that they know their area best. So obviously, as the ex-chair of the City Safe Board, you'll know that Colleen and Jenny and partners like that look at bids from a Liverpool perspective. In St Helens, it's the likes of Sam Murray and people like that. So what we're getting is we're getting a real granular detail around each of the respective local authority areas, so that we know it works in those areas. So it's a real blend of what Andy's just described, and then engaging those community safety partnerships and how they reach into all the sorts of CVS and local voluntary organisations to be able to get a real mix of what we can do at a Merseyside level, and then what we can do really at the sort of local level. I hope you don't mind me saying that, Andy.
No, absolutely. Listen, thank you. Really important in that, thank you.
I'm not quite sure what's happened.
Councillor Jan Grace has indicated that she'd like to ask a question.
Hi, thank you, Andy. That was very insightful and optimistic. I think it's great to look at the roots of behavioural problems, because certainly I can understand if you're being marginalised that you feel angry and you want to hit back and perhaps don't want to contribute. But my question is actually probably better answered by Merseyside Fire. It's number 6 on page 10. It's about the secondment of a full-time post. I wondered if there were any plans of making that permanent.
Obviously, Councillor, I'm in dialogue with Andy all the time. Now that post is fully funded by the Merseyside Violence Reduction Partnership. So for the period that the post is funded and needed, clearly we will continue to have it. We have had some conversations around next year, will that be a full-time post or a part-time post, because like Andy's already covered, we have a real significant contribution, and we want to try and make sure that most of that money is spent on interventions. So it's a real fine balance between having that central team coordinated to do the work, and then being able to have enough fiscal support to industrialise the initiatives that really work at a local level. So me and Andy are in consultation all the time around that. What I would say is, as long as there's funding, we will definitely have somebody within the Violence Reduction Partnership in Merseyside. And I think, as Andy's already described, as a fire and rescue service, that puts us head and shoulders above other areas, because we are influencing what we can do within each of the local authority areas in order to support violence reduction and the broader elements of it, but definitely around our brand, making sure that arson is being tackled and is being taken very seriously. And you just don't have that in any other violence reduction partnership across the country. So it's, you know, very pleased to be involved, and that relationship will continue.
That's great, thank you.
Okay. I can't see any more questions on the chat. Sorry, Councillor
Andrew Makinson's indicated that he'd like to raise a question.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Very good presentation, a lot of good work going on. I was slightly surprised to see on the list of partners that Merseytravel wasn't listed, where they certainly have been involved in similar projects in the past. Is there any particular reason for that?
No, and you know, it's a really good point. What I'd say is we're speaking with many partners, and whilst we do have contact with Mersey Travel amongst many, that I suppose what I showed you on the screen there was those who are represented in the core team. We do deal with many more partners who aren't part of the core team but play a very important role in the VRP. So Mersey Travel aren't in the core team. Whether there will be a need for that moving forward, I don't know. They're not certainly one of those that I'm currently in dialogue with, trying to negotiate getting more expertise into the team. However, I think you make a really good point, and they are an important partner to be involved with, even if not involved in the core team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments?
Councillor Doreen Knight's indicating that she'd like to speak.
Okay.
Can I just all this funding that's coming in, did you say that any was going down to City Safe or the Community Safety Partnership to go to local communities, or is that not happening?
No, as Ben touched upon, Councillor, we've got a situation where our interventions budget, we split that between we've got the 5 community safety partnerships across Merseyside, each of whom get a different amount, and so they get a substantial amount of money to do local initiatives and things that they know is required there. So we still work with them on it, and there's a lot of scrutiny both ways in terms of that. The remaining interventions budget stays within the project leads within the team, like Mike and Pete, and we do more pan-Merseyside interventions. So you've got both a local and a pan-Merseyside approach, both within the VRP and with our community safety partners.
Do you know whether there's any drug prevention initiatives going on then?
Sorry, I have to apologise, I can't hear you very well.
Can you tell me whether there's anything around drug prevention?
Drug prevention, it's not something, there's a lot of drug prevention work going on across the partnership, and so the VRP, whilst we're obviously acutely aware of the importance and the impact of drugs and the links to violence, we don't have a great deal of our time, our resource, our budget committed to working specifically around drug prevention and the impacts of illicit drugs.
Just at the Cheshire Lines, it seems to me that we're listening to the news that there's a lot of young people getting involved in that.
Yeah, so I suppose that's where our biggest link is into drugs. We do a lot of work around county lines, but not specifically around drugs itself. So there is clearly a link, and we do have those pieces of work there. But I suppose what we're trying to do, and I don't know if I made this clear during the presentation, but in some respects, we want to fill gaps. So some things are very well catered for. Some things are done really well across the partnership and so on. So what I don't want us to do is duplicate things that are already in place. So you've got drug intervention programs and things going on elsewhere, and there's lots of work going on around trying to reduce the impacts of illicit drugs. So in the VRP, we're trying to fill gaps. And like I say, going back to that innovation, we're trying to bring things in that are, 1, necessary, but 2, aren't already there, or indeed take an idea that's there now and develop it further. So county lines, very important to us, and we do a great deal of work around county lines. And I mentioned some of the films and the media work around county lines, but specifically and directly around the use of drugs is not something we put a lot of time into.
Yeah, what I was talking about is prevention within young people before they get to that stage.
I see. Well, what I'd say is some of the programs that we have are around promoting healthy relationships, around good decision making, around education and the importance of it. So what I'd say is, whilst our intention is to do that to draw them away from becoming involved in violence, I would hope lots and lots of our interventions actually have a positive impact on them as human beings, and therefore show them and draw them away from other dangers as well, whether that be county lines, drugs, violence, crime, and so on. So hopefully we are also having a big impact there as well, and our evaluation will actually comment on that in terms of whether we're impacting across other crime types also.
Okay,
Thank you, Councillor.
Chair,
Okay.
I think Group Manager Ben Ryder was just wanting to come in again at that point.
Okay.
Hi, Chair. Yeah, thank you. Just to build again on what Andy's covered in very good detail is a lot of the work that we're doing within the partnership, and particularly Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service, is trauma informed, and it focuses on adverse childhood experience. That contributes to a number of different areas other than the specific serious youth violence that the VRP is very much there to focus on and help tackle. So we do contribute to other factors such as serious and organised crime, diverting children and young people away from that. It does help children and young people develop strategies and coping mechanisms if they've been subject to domestic abuse or witnessed domestic abuse. And it most definitely helps them build confidence so that they are less likely to be involved in drugs and more likely to go on to full-time employment and live a more prosperous life. So it absolutely contributes to a number of the things that the council has mentioned. However, we very much target specifically to divert away from serious youth violence because that was the Home Office priority. And so if you think about the broader interventions that all the community safety partnerships will do, what this has enabled us to do is focus specifically in an area and industrialise our activities towards that because it's doing so much harm. And then what that enables us to do is get upstream, and it's that sort of invest to save model where we're then able to focus on the wider impacts of serious and organised crime, domestic abuse and things like that, because the VRP is so powerful and impactful in a focused area. So it does contribute more widely, but it is very targeted and very impactful in a very focused way.
Okay. Kelly, I'm having problems on screen seeing if anybody has indicated whether they want to talk. So do interrupt me if somebody has indicated.
No, we've not received any more indications. I think everybody's commented that wish to do so. Okay.
So can I thank Andy for all of that, and I think it's certainly been an interesting presentation, and I don't think we have any more contributions. So once again, thank you for that, and we'll go straight on to agenda item 4, which is, just bear with me a minute while I get my script up.
Yeah, can we just agree if members have noted that report?
Yeah, it is a report that is just for noting. So if that's okay, I'm assuming that that's unanimous. Okay. So we'll now go on to agenda item 4, which is the publication of the UCLAN, which is Minimising Firefighters' Exposure to Toxic Fire Effluents Interim Best Practice Report. Now we have Nick again and Craig, so we'll go straight to Nick if that's okay.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Chair. I'll just be very brief again because, as we say, we have a presentation of Craig just in about 30 seconds. I'll just introduce it correctly though. So first of all, the purpose of the report is to inform members of the publication of the independent UCLAN, so University of Central Lancashire report, titled Minimising Firefighters' Exposure to Toxic Fire Effluents, and it's the interim best practice. The recommendations for members is that they note the recommendations of the report, that they note the work carried out by MFRS in relation to contaminants and firefighter safety, and also that they note the short presentation by Craig, our Health and Safety Manager. Just very briefly, an introduction. In November 2020, an FBU commissioned report entitled Minimising Firefighters' Exposure to Toxic Effluents was published, and the full report you should have all had in your pack prior to this meeting. The research for the report itself was comprehensive, and it contained a review of current and previous UK FRS decontamination processes and policies, and also a survey of over 10,000 firefighters. That subsequently resulted in recommendations, two sets of recommendations really divided into two groups. One of those recommendations was for our fire service personnel, and the other recommendations were for the fire and rescue services themselves. And I certainly don't intend to go through those now. They are in the report, and I'm sure Craig will touch on them, and I really don't want to steal Craig's thunder at all. The reason we have brought this to members today really is because when the report was released in November, it did take up quite a lot of media interest. So we thought it was in everyone's interest to bring that to our authority members today. So again, I will move it over to Craig now, if that's okay. He'll provide a short presentation and take any questions. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Deb. Good afternoon, Chair, colleagues, members, councillors. My name's Craig Whitfield, as introduced by the Deputy Fire Chief Fire Officer, and I am the Health and Safety Manager for Merseyside Fire and Rescue Service. So I'm going to take you through a short presentation now, which will hopefully give some background around the report, and then cover kind of the recommendations and where the services are in actioning the recommendations. So I will just attempt to share my screen. Okay, is that sharing, Kelly?
Yes, Craig, I've got it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the Deputy Chief's covered a couple of bits there, which I'll touch on, but as I said, I'll take you through the presentation and take any questions at the end. So the purpose of the presentation is to give you a bit of background into the report that was published by UCLAN. I'll also cover some of the media interest that the publication has drew, and I'll also expand on that because the media interest does date back over a number of years in this particular area of interest. The report makes a suite of recommendations which I will highlight and go through, and then I'll finish off by covering what Merseyside Fire and Rescue has done to date in terms of the contamination piece, the next steps that we propose to undertake to continue our positive work, and then just a bit of background to how the Health and Safety Executive is now supporting the cause in this area of work. So to start off with just a bit of background, as the Deputy Chief mentioned, this is a UCLAN report that was commissioned by the Fire Brigade Union, and it was published in November of last year. The report itself focuses on some groundbreaking research. It was led by a professor called Professor Anna Steck, and she has kind of focused on the areas of contamination and possible heightened risk that the firefighters face in terms of developing or contracting cancer later on in life or other diseases. It's an evidence-led report, so when we've looked through it, it's used both qualitative and quantitative data and research in order to draw its conclusions. It started with a comprehensive literature review of the information that's already out there, because there are a number of publications both nationally and internationally in this area of work. It's also included a survey of around 10,000 firefighters from across the United Kingdom, well, from England, and it's also undertook some firefighter contamination testing on stations, so tests around the stations for levels of contamination, including kit rooms and appliance bays and appliance cabs. And finally, it's also looked at fire and rescue service decontamination policies that are currently in place. What the report highlighted in the preamble is that this report is going to contribute to the broader interest, and as I previously mentioned, there is quite a broad interest in this area, certainly from fire and rescue services and authorities, from trade unions and from health. So it will only bring further support to kind of the research that's going on in that area, and it's something that Merseyside Fire and Rescue certainly welcomes.
and you know, we'll look to kind of react to. And it's highlighted that based on all the research within this report, it's highlighted itself as best practice, which has resulted in a suite of recommendations, which I'll touch on further into the presentation. So in terms of media interest, as the Deputy Chief touched on, this was put on the agenda on the back of some media interest through mainly the Times, I think was the article that came out and was at the forefront in November. But this is nothing new. This is nothing that we don't know already and aren't aware of. The media interest in this area dates back over a number of years, and it's changed through the years. So you can look at some of the articles on the screen where it goes back to firefighters facing an increased risk of getting cancer to firefighters twice as likely, firefighters 4 times as likely. The point of the immediate interest is that whenever there's a publication or guidance note that is published, it does draw immediate interest. And then it does draw back in the focus of fire and rescue services to make sure they are doing all they can in response to this area. So the most recent one that, as I say, brought this to the table was the Morning Star and the Times on the left of your screen. They were the publications in November that were distributed through the media and that you may well have seen and possibly raised some questions with yourself. So, but again, just to kind of underpin and highlight that this is nothing new. This is something that the Fire and Rescue Service and certainly Merseyside through the Health, Safety and Welfare Committee continually have on the radar and continually look to work towards making sure we're doing everything we can to keep our firefighters as safe as they can be. So the report itself makes a number of recommendations, and what I'll do now is I'll just go through the recommendations. The recommendations, as mentioned earlier, are split into 2 distinct parts. So there's recommendations for fire service personnel, which is that individual responsibility, and then there's recommendations for the fire and rescue services that they should be looking at the broader picture in mechanisms and procedures and policies that they can implement to support the piece of work. So the first recommendation for fire service personnel is in relation to respiratory protective equipment, SCBA, which in a nutshell is breathing apparatus, or can be respirators, face masks, etc. So, and the recommendation is clear. What it highlights is that at all times during firefighting activities, breathing apparatus or respiratory protection should be worn. This is to extend into post-fire where areas of what have been on fire may be gassing off. So when crews are damping down, turning over, etc., the recommendation is that the respiratory protection should still be used, should still be worn, and should be the last piece of equipment that is disrobed once they're out the risk area. So that's the first recommendation of the report and something that Merseyside complies with already. It also touches on the safe transportation of contaminated kit. If a kit is suspected of being contaminated, it should be transported back in an airtight, suitable container. Again, a recommendation that the service is ahead of. We have quite a clear and robust clean kit policy in place at present, which again I'll touch on when we come to what Merseyside have done so far, but that is the second recommendation of the report. It then goes on to talk about hygiene and clean and dry clothes. So hygiene, again, something that we've got embedded. It talks around the hygiene post-incident to avoid eating, drinking and smoking until you are absolutely thoroughly decontaminated and cleaned. So something which is quite instilled in what we do as a service. It also mentions around clean, dry clothes and having them accessible post-fire. So in an ideal world, they will be accessible on a fire engine or the suitable location post-fire, so that actually you're not getting into any of the cabs or the vehicles with dirty kit. That being said, the firefighting kit that we wear does provide a really high level of protection from contaminants. So the clothes underneath should be protected. Other recommendations, so it talks around the PPE for cleaning of soiled PPE and equipment. So post-fire, it talks around if you're changing a BA set and cylinder, if you're cleaning off some equipment, that a level of PPE should still be worn, and that should be done to protect your hands, face, etc., and continued through until the piece of kit or PPE is decontaminated, and then you're free of kind of receiving any further contamination. That's coupled in with a clean PPE policy, and it's identifying as one of the best practice recommendations that actually the firefighters shouldn't be operating in any dirty or contaminated kit. They should have clean kit. There's a recognition that post-fire there are times where kit will be grossly contaminated, but that's at the point where the decontamination will kick in and they will be suitably bagged and tagged and clean kit sourced. Again, something which I will touch on when I get around to the Merseyside fire actions that we have taken to date. The quota shower within the hour. So again, very, very simple recommendation that post-fire and upon returning to a station, any personnel who've been in a fire environment should shower and clean. And then it also makes quite a significant point around regular health screening and recording of attendance at incidents, specifically fire incidents over the course of a firefighter's career. It recommends that as a strong advisory. So that's the final kind of recommendation that is made for fire service personnel. The report then moves on to fire and rescue services recommendations, and again, there's not as many of these, but they are quite broad in what they're saying. So the first one is decontamination procedures. It highlights that every fire and rescue service must have a fully risk-assessed decontamination procedure that covers en route to, at and return from fire scenarios. And then it also underpins that with a recognition of the staff understanding what those procedures are. It talks about up-to-date training, so up-to-date training in decontamination, up-to-date training in the harmful effects of contamination, up-to-date training in the awareness of what contamination is and how we can mitigate, prevent and reduce that contamination. So it touches on having that in place within a service. It moves on to policies for PPE. Now the policies that it talks about for PPE are that services should have robust policies and procedures in place that look after the routine care, maintenance, inspection and professional cleaning of PPE, something which certainly Merseyside Fire and Rescue's got embedded across the service. It talks about designated zones on fire stations, and again, something which is in place. So it talks about clean and dirty areas. Fire kits should never enter certain areas of a station. We do have designated kit rooms where clean fire kits should be held. It talks about areas for contaminated kit that should never enter the station, and prohibited areas. So it's a clarity between where fire kit can and can't be within a station environment, and making sure that they reduce the rate or risk of cross-contamination. And then final point the report makes in terms of these recommendations is the regular cleaning and decontamination to reduce secondary exposures. And the secondary exposure might be from cleaning of equipment, cleaning of cabs, etc., etc. So it makes a recommendation that it should have robust procedures in place to reduce any secondary exposures. So that brings us on to what we have done to date. And as I said, I have to be really, really clear on this, that Merseyside Fire and Rescue have been at the forefront of leading on some of this work. This isn't a knee-jerk reaction to something that was published in November. We have been leaders on this since back in 2013-14. You know, we have, as I talk through the slide here, we have a well-established health, safety and welfare committee. They have a joint statement which is signed by the relevant parties that sit on that committee, which includes all trade union representation, occupational health, health and safety, and they have signed up to that joint commitment around PPE. And that joint commitment, which was signed back in 2016 on the back of some Bureau Veritas research, it actually covers a number of points which are already covered in this report, kind of underpinning the fact that, yes, we are getting this right and we are moving in the right direction in the area of the contamination piece. So that committee meets quarterly, and that is the real driver behind some of this work, with the engine being the Health and Safety Department that feeds that through into the Health and Safety Committee. As touched on, back in 2014 going into 15, Merseyside Fire and Rescue commissioned its own research through 3 different papers from Bureau Veritas, who are scientific advisors. We currently use them to advise us in areas of hazmats and detection, identification and monitoring in terms of when we go to incidents, and they also provide input to our hazmat officers on a regular basis. They done a piece of research themselves, commissioned by us, produced a number of reports which went through the relevant committees back at that time, and then they were shared nationally, which again underpins kind of some of the lead role that we've taken in this area. Other work we've done, so fitness first, we've done a lot of work around understanding actually contamination and the transfer of contamination. So we identified that body weight, absorption rates, hydration, they can all be contributory factors to how we possibly absorb contaminants. If for example, a contaminant has got on our neck, our arms, our hands, actually how fit we are, how hydrated we are can have an impact on the absorption rate, if indeed there is one. So on that, we've done a fair bit of work, and we've implemented a health and safety fitness advisor. We have gyms on all stations with a dedicated hour within the working routine to ensure firefighters' fitness remains at the highest possible level. We have fitness routines available on the portal for all staff to be able to adopt, and that's 24/7 access. We also have issued 2 water bottles, 2 sizable water bottles to each member of staff to ensure hydration. So they will have one that's kept on the appliance with their kit in their day bag, and they'll also have another one that they keep on the person as they move around the station to ensure hydration, with the view that the better hydrated they are, the less absorption that they would look to kind of achieve. So there's a real focus on that fitness, and then underpinning that is we obviously have lots of support through occupational health, and we have regular fitness testing and monitoring on a yearly basis. So real focus in that area, and some of that is around getting that foundation right in the first instance to be able to tackle the larger issues then. This piece falls under the brand and the tagline "Clean is the new tough" under the NFCC. So I think historically there has been a culture shift within the fire and rescue service going back many years. A dirty kit could be signified as hard work or a badge of honour, but certainly in our service at this current moment in time, that is not the case. Clean is the new tough, and I think our staff are much more focused and much more aware of the importance of a clean kit and the importance of understanding why a clean kit is important. So that is branded up off the NFCC, and we continue to support that locally through our own interventions and our own processes that we implement. PPE is obviously the biggest kind of focus on what can protect us from contaminants. Based on an environment of fire where we are going to have to enter some of these environments, we are going to be contaminated, or our kit will be contaminated. The level between ourselves and the contaminant is the PPE, so there's been a real focus on that. The service is currently continuing its process of rolling out 2 full personal issue kits to all firefighters, so that continues. But on the back of that, we also have pool kit and 24/7 access to this kit. So if the firefighters was to have a particular busy day and work their way through 2 kits, we do have access to clean kits. There is no expectation from us as a service, an authority, a health and safety department. There is no expectation for our staff to have to operate in contaminated kit. So we do have that access. Going back a couple of years now, we made a move from fire kit, specifically the tunics for technical rescue incidents, and we moved across to a technical rescue jacket. So road traffic collisions, rescue from height, depth, water rescue, so on and so forth. There are a number of different elements there where we no longer wear a fire tunic, and we keep it specifically for fires, and we use a technical rescue jacket for the technical rescues that we attend. So this reduces the possible use of the tunic and also reduces possible contamination risks. We also purchased and implemented half-face personal fit respirators with particulate filters on. So these are much less onerous and cumbersome than wearing a BA set to maybe turn over the debris of a fire, and they will offer a level of respiratory protection whilst offering comfort for the user. Every member of operational staff has been issued with one of these with additional filters, and they've all been personally face fit tested to ensure they are fit for purpose and provide the level of protection that is required. Also, the issue of PPE day sacks, which in a nutshell is like a backpack that holds all the relevant pieces of kit, holds the water bottle, alcohol gels, cleaning wipes, spare balaclavas, etc. So we introduced them, and they sit in the back of a fire engine, so crews have access to what they need to have access to ensure post-incident they are in a position to decontaminate properly. Stringent PPE checks. We have really, really robust PPE checks in place. We have regular daily checks that need to be conducted at the start of each shift, in addition to sort of monthly and checks beyond that. And what that does is that puts responsibility and accountability on the wearer. It used to be logged in handwritten books, but we've moved to electronic, and I'll touch on one of the next slides what the benefits of that are. But again, really robust checks in place to ensure that our firefighters have got safe kit before they start a shift. Contaminated kit is all outsourced for specialist cleaning. We have the contracts in place for that. We do not wash any of our own kit that is contaminated. It goes right through to professional cleaners and provides that reassurance that a thorough job has been done. So we also issued glove lanyards, and such a small kind of introduction of a really basic piece of kit, but really impacted in what it was trying to achieve. So we recognise that firefighting gloves can be, one of the key pieces of PPE that become heavily contaminated, because a firefighter will be using their hands for pretty much everything. And historically, the first thing a firefighter will do when they've finished is stick their gloves in their boots or their helmet for transportation back somewhere. So we now, all firefighters have been issued with lanyards so that the gloves are stored in a lanyard, hung up on the tunic, and are not placed in boots or helmets. Electronic recording of BA wearers. So this provides not only recording of PPE checks, but it also records wears now. So at the click of a button, we're able to search by name or by individual or by incident number who has worn BA and for how long. So this is now well embedded. It's in use across the service, all stations. Every BA wear, every BA test is recorded on this system, and at a few clicks we're able to kind of carry out that maintenance and monitoring of individuals. Moving on, specific BA wipes for post-incident decon. So you'll see a little picture at the bottom of that slide. The operational equipment team have sourced BA wipes for instant decon, and all them wipes are for hands, neck, face. Inevitably, sometimes when a firefighter disrobes, they may get a bit of sort of something on their neck or the hands, and this quite simplistic control measure is there and ready available to remove any of that. That's supported by alcohol gels on all appliances. We have implemented a clean cab policy, and there is a clean cab policy checklist and procedure in place with posters on fire engines and on stations. It goes through what we should be doing in order to ensure a clean cab. It kind of complements what we're doing around the COVID piece, but certainly it's embedded. It's getting embedded now, and ensures that kind of at the forefront thinking around clean cabs and taking ownership of it. We offer we provide an off-the-run facility for clean kit. So, following an incident, if firefighters have contaminated kit, there is no expectation for them to put them on a fire engine in case they get another shout. They can book unavailable through Fire Control Watch Officer until they have returned to a station and sourced a new kit and taken a shower or whatever they need to do to ensure they are decontaminated. We absolutely have no expectation to see our firefighters operating contaminated kit. And just to kind of finish off that, what we've done around there, so every fire station does have showering facilities, and as we continue with our modification of our estate, them facilities only get better. And we do have robust health and fitness monitoring measures in place through occupational health. And again, we can access anything we need to do in terms of the history of firefighters' wares through the electronic recording. So the next steps then, obviously on the back of this report, but the next steps that were pre-planned in anyway, because this is an ongoing piece of work, is we will continue, we as in the Health and Safety Department, the committee and the organisation, to support the Clean is the New Tough policy of the NFCC. And we have conducted an initial gap analysis against the UCLAN recommendations to see where we sit. And I think the initial indications from that, based on the recommendations I've touched on this afternoon and the steps that we've taken to date, in fact, actually, we are nearly all of the way there in terms of not having any gaps against them recommendations. We are in a really good and positive place. But things on the horizon as we move forward now. So my team are looking at additional electronic prompts within the BA and PPE recording system. Excuse me. And that will be around contamination, prompts around, is your kit contaminated? Have you changed it? And that's just like, that's the small stuff that you keep dropping in to change culture and ensure that actually you see it, if it becomes repetitive and you see it enough times, it becomes second nature that actually, yeah, I've changed my kit, or no, I need to change my kit. Additional PPE, there'll be a push on that for cleaning and testing. So at incidents where crews might be changing a BA set, there'll be communications and a push to ensure that they're doing that with relevant, relevant face mask or True Touch gloves on to reduce that risk of any cross-contamination. And that will be expanded to certain roles on the instant ground, whereby over a period of time, they may not have normally worn gloves. So if they're completing like a BA entry control officer job or a command support job, they may not have gloves on, but they may still be touching pieces of equipment where they could become contaminated. So there'll be some work around pushing that to ensure that we have PPE on for all tasks that do require it. We will continue to monitor research as we have done over many years now, and in relation to the research of this report, we will continue to progress and react, and we will continue to seek out through the Health, Safety and Welfare Committee and then through my department any areas of research that needs tighter focus. We are exploring the use of external contamination bins on stations, and we'll look to use some health and safety funding to progress that. And while we do have designated areas now, what this will do is just push on a bit further so the contaminated kit actually never enters a building. And to finish off on the next steps that we have in the short term, my team have developed a toolbox talk that will be delivered to operational crews through the station-based station managers, and this will tie into the training recommendations within the UCLAN report on actually, do we understand the harmful effects of these effluents and how we can mitigate and reduce the risk from them. So, and again, finally, we'll continue to monitor any future research. Okay, so the last slide before I bring the presentation to a close. This is highlighted in the first couple of pages of the UCLAN report, and it just kind of indicates the Health and Safety Executive monitors the progress of the fire brigade union research and provides assistance in implementing recommendations which seek to improve the work environments of UK firefighters. This should include measures to minimise contamination from clothing, equipment, and reduce overall exposure to firefighters, the families and the public. So, you know, that was recommended House of Commons and Environmental Committee. So it does have a little bit of weight behind it in terms of health and safety executive backing. But as I said at the outset of this presentation and the report and the paper, this is nothing new. This is something that Merseyside is aware of, is working continually towards, and is in a really, really good place with. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the presentation. So I'll pass back to Kelly or the chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thanks very much for that excellent report. Once again, I can't see who's asking, who wants to ask a question or make a comment. So are you okay with that, Kelly?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We've got a few indications. We've got Councillor Les Byron would like to speak.
Yes,
okay, thanks, Les.
Yes, thank you very much. Very good presentation. I read probably November time articles in the press about the, you know, reports of contamination. I passed it through to officers, asked them if we could refer this to the Scrutiny Committee, and that's why it's here today, you know, in that respect. We also received a letter from Matt Rack, General Secretary of the FBU, again highlighting this, and I was able to reply to him and say, we've already got it in hand. We have policies, we're working with it, we have the joint health and safety working groups within the organisation, and also we've asked for this to be referred to scrutiny as in today. Other sort of discussions had come through from the representative bodies, basically, Craig, to say we've changed our system of operations slightly in the movement to the hybrid system and crews attending from home, and therefore they're carrying with them some of the protective equipment or the, you know, sort of working equipment. And the suggestion was that they would take that home with them, or it was being carried in a car, in a domestic personal vehicle, which children could have been travelling in as well, and that there would be potentially contaminated kit that would be cross-contamination exposed to children. Could you just confirm to us that that's not the case?
No, thank you, Chair, Councillor. So, no, what we do have absolutely embedded and is robust is the clean PPE policy, okay? And that applies to whether it's in a vehicle, a fire appliance, or any other operational sort of aspect. And the fact of that is that any kit that is suspected to be contaminated in any way, shape or form is not fit for operational duty until decontamination, should be bagged and should be removed. So any kit that is transported, whether it be through courier, whether it be in a personal vehicle, or whether it be on the fire engine, should be clean kit, because at the point of it becoming contaminated, we have the procedures in place to implement and refresh with a clean kit. Now, for elements like the helmets, they are cleanable with the antibacterial approved wipes. So there are elements of the kit that can be washed off and wiped down at the scene or prior to be putting into a kit bag. And elements that might absorb contaminants such as the fire kit itself or balaclavas, they are to be sent off for specialist cleaning. And we are quite clear and strict and robust in that we do not accept, we do not facilitate, and we do not approve of the transportation of any contaminated kit. We also offer kit bags, so the kits are in sealed bags when even though they are clean, they are still in sealed, zipped up bags when they are transported, and then procedures are in place and embedded, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, much appreciated.
Okay.
Chair, if Councillor Andrew Makinson has indicated that he'd like to speak.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. fascinating report. A lot of figures in there that are slightly disturbing. One that particularly jumped out at me was the age of PPE, where some firefighters were claiming their equipment was up to 15 years old. I'm wondering how that actually compares to the reality on Merseyside. But more generally, clearly this is a nationwide study, includes a lot of very different authorities from ours, many of whom rely heavily on retained firefighters. Is there any way we could perhaps try and get some sort of breakdown of how those figures compare for Merseyside from the authors of the report?
I'll be honest, Councillor, I'm not so sure how easy or difficult that will be. It's something I can certainly ask the team to have a look at. So we do sit on regional health and safety working groups, and with UCLAN being part of Lancashire, I might be able to tap into a couple of contacts within Lancashire Fire and Rescue around. So you want a comparison against retained?
Well, a comparison of the situation on Merseyside compared to the figures in this report, simply because many of the other authorities are very different from us, and because they have lots of retained firefighters, lots of part-time firefighters, their situation might be quite different. For instance, on the age of PPE, I imagine a lot of retained firefighters might be using a lot older PPE than our full-time firefighters are using on Merseyside.
Yeah, and it would probably be ill of me to speak of other services where I don't really fully understand what the processes are in place. I can provide reassurance that in Merseyside through asset management, we do have quite robust plans in place, whether it be around vehicles and assets or PPE and equipment, and they do have end of life, and they aren't extended beyond that. The fire kit that we're currently rolling out, so if we use that as the element of PPE, because we've now moved back to personal issue 2 kits to everyone, every member of operational staff is being issued with a brand new shiny top of the range piece of fire kit, and the retaining stock that we currently have, a lot of it is still fit for purpose with long dates left on it. So the kit, I feel very confident within Merseyside is all still relatively new. Certainly the personal issue stuff that's being rolled out through the rest of this year.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Andrew.
Councillor Jan Grace has indicated that she'd like to speak as well.
Okay.
Hi, thank you, Craig. It was just to assure members, as I sit on the Health and Safety Committee, that the meetings are attended by occupational health, as Craig said, and also the rep bodies. And most of the discussion there, I think, Craig, is about mitigation of risk. And I can remember that the first meeting I went to, a CFO, if that's all right, I think Mottram, I remember him explaining to me how this cultural change in wearing a dirty outfit as a badge of honour, that it had taken a while, but it was now embedded in the culture that, to be clean is essentially safer. So really it was just to let members know that this sort of discussion is happening regularly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Jan.
We don't have any other questions indicated, thanks.
Okay. Can I thank Craig for that? It has been, it is an excellent explanation of a report, obviously. I think that this will be something that's certainly a topic that we're going to be exploring as a scrutiny committee as it progresses. So once again, thank you for that on behalf of the committee. Thank you. We'll now go on to the next item. First of all, are we okay with the recommendations of the report? I'm assuming that's okay. No dissent. Thank you for that. We'll now go on to the next item.
Sorry, Chair, you're on mute.
Did anybody hear anything of what I just said? No. No. Okay. Can I just thank Craig then for that? It's something. The subject will be an ongoing situation, and the Scrutiny Committee will be looking with interest at how this proceeds. So I think that you will have an open invitation to the committee as we progress. So can we now go on to the actual recommendations? I'm assuming the recommendations of the report are okay. I can't see any dissent on that. Okay, so we'll now go on to agenda item 5, which is the standing item, which is the review of the Scrutiny Committee and the forward work plan. Once again, we are still relatively new as a Scrutiny Committee. We're now going into our second year as a full committee. Now, it's a case of we will have things on the agenda that we will want to be put on. Certainly, the officers will be wanting us to see. But obviously, it's a case of members of the committee if we want to put something forward ourselves. So I would hope that anything that we do want on, or anything that individual members want to put on for a future committee, we all know the procedure. Get in touch with the officers. Certainly, get in touch with me and Jan as well as the chairs. So I can't actually see if anybody wants to talk again. So I'm going to have to pull it through to you again, Kelly. Has anybody indicated?
Sorry, Chair, no one's indicated at this stage.
Okay. Can I ask for anyone to indicate if they are going to talk, or that they want to say something as a comment? Put forward anything? No?
No, nothing's been raised, Chair.
Okay. So that more or less then puts us to the last item of the agenda, which is the date of the next meeting, which will be, if I'm correct, which will be the 4th of March. And before I go, can I just stop on behalf of the committee wish Dave Mottram well, and also anybody else of all the rest of our people who have been touched by this horrible pandemic. I think our best wishes as a committee go forward. So once again, thanks for everybody's attendance, and the date of the next meeting will be the 4th of March, and I shall now close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you.